glad that you all carved time out of your schedule to be here, and we certainly hope that we can bring some value to your day and answer a lot of questions. Because this is more of a high-level overview, we won't get into a lot of the detail. We usually do that one-on-one with clients, so this gives us an opportunity to look at the process involved in starting a business, and you may be anywhere along that spectrum. Maybe it's just an idea, or maybe you're 99% done and you're ready to launch and open doors. So we hope that we'll answer some questions, but more than anything, let you know we've got resources and people to help you. And I would encourage you to stop us anywhere along the way, raise your hand. If something comes up that poses a question, so we can kind of address it at that point, because there might be someone else that has the same question. So don't worry, it's not a formal setting. We want this to be pretty relaxed. And so as we go along, if it's something that you need clarification on, definitely step in and we'll try to address it then. So it's good that we would know each other. So with that, I'd like to kind of go around the room, and you just put a light in your mouth. Maybe I'll start over here. Let me go over here and start with Jim. We'll come around this way. This is Jim Haddon. He is also an employee of the state, but he's in a different responsibility. So Jim, you can tell what you do.
Sure. So my name is Jim Haddon. I work for the Indiana Procurement Technical Assistance Center. It's a sister agency of SBDC, Small Business Development Center, and we're both under the umbrella of the Indiana Economic Development Corporation. The PTACs were funded in 1985 by the Department of Defense to assist with encouraging small businesses to become government contract ready, so they're available for the supply chain in defense and the government sector. So what I do is I help small businesses that want to do government contracting. That could include federal, state, local, county, regional, airports, casinos, anything that's government funded. So what we did, well, I guess you don't really want me to give my whole spiel, do you? I'll go ahead and give my whole spiel. These are the introductions, so everyone gets to speak, and then there's only an hour left for the program. I've got, I don't know, I think there are some flyers in your folders. Here's my business card. We're located on the 4th floor of Innovation Point in Evansville, a short drive from here. EREP is the administrator of the floor. It's a combined chamber, regional, and local economic development entity. They host SBDC and PTAC. So we provide services at no cost to you. As far as government contracting, we do one-on-one counseling. We provide assistance with registrations and certifications. If any of you have been involved in some of the PPP loans, you probably had to get registered in SAM, the System for Award Management. But concisely, if you want to do work with the state, of course, you have to be registered with the Secretary of State, and you would want to apply for and create a bidder's registration profile. If you want to work for the federal government, used to be until April 4th, you would get a DUNS number. Now they've transitioned to something called a unique entity identifier. It's like a 12-digit alphanumeric number. And then you register in the System for Award Management. So we help with those registrations. If you want certifications, I can help with women-owned business certification, veteran-owned business, minority-owned business certifications. The state of Indiana has 2 procurement entities, IDOA, the Indiana Department of Administration, and NDOT. NDOT has over $1 billion a year budget. If you're in construction or heavy road equipment supply, NDOT's a good source of contracting if you want to diversify and get into the government sector. Usually businesses want to be somewhat successful and then diversify into government contracting. So we also do workshops. I can help with proposal preparation. We have a bid match service that scours bid boards. We do a lot of networking. Just this week, I was at by Indiana in French Lick. It was a crane. Bedford Chamber, I think Jasper, and I don't think Vincent is included, but they usually kind of coordinate. There were like 150 vendor booths and 400 people there. So it was great networking if one is looking to do federal contracting specifically with crane. So that's pretty much what I do. I'm going to leave some of these, some of my pins and some flyers for anyone. If you have any questions, you can ask, but thank you for letting me speak. This is the first time I've been to this building. This is fantastic.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
This is state of the art. You guys got something really going here.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I already kind of introduced myself, but just to give you an idea of some of the things that I want to do here at the Tech Center, is just have more workshops, more events like this, and provide professional development and networking opportunities for Pike County and our surrounding communities. And we have an incredible makerspace that I'm so excited to get training on. So now, when people are here at the co-working space, and if they have an idea or an already existing business and they want to try something out, they can do that. So again, thank you for coming, and I'm excited to learn about all of you.
My name is Cecily Mabry. I live in Winslow, just here in Pike County. I have 4 kids, and I recently just bought a daycare, and we're in the process of changing hands. So
You're about to go on one kid.
I am. I told my husband he should just give me another baby. That would be a lot easier. But I guess we are going to buy a daycare.
Big demand for that business.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. And room to expand too.
So, and that is the goal, is to have a second one within 5 years. So I'm very excited. Give me all the babies. And everyone is very excited. The community is very supportive, which helps because I'm like a deer in the headlights. I mean, I was a stay-at-home mom for 5 years, and then I was a manager at a restaurant for 5 years, and all I want to do is, get puked on and pooped on all day. I just can't. I'm very excited.
Can we quote you on that?
Yeah, you can. I mean, I can
This
do
is being
that all
recorded.
day. I love it.
So I was just relieved that someone purchased it and wanted it to remain a daycare because it is so needed.
And there is a barn included, so my husband is about to become a business owner too. That's his, whatever he's got in the works.
Oh yeah, I'll get your contact information because I need a transition plan for my top.
And
I
then,
love her. She's good now.
yeah, I'm very excited. I announced this like 2 weeks ago. No one knew except for my mom and dad, like my mother-in-law, my siblings, my husband's siblings. Nobody knew. This was a big surprise. And I already have 60-something kids on a waiting list. So
Wow.
We definitely
So
talk. I
here
got a
we
couple
go.
more years, so my name on
I
that.
have pregnant women like on the waiting list, like not even here yet kids.
That's
So,
awesome. That is awesome.
yeah, I'm ready to learn because here it comes.
My name's Aaliyah Hearing. I'm currently a senior at Pike Central High School. I'm an intern at the Chamber of Commerce, and I'm going to IUPUI's Kelly School of Business for Finance next year.
Nice.
And I'm Jill Hyman. I am the director of the Chamber of Commerce. And I am so excited to bring workshops. And I love collaborating with the Economic Development and the Tech Center. So I'm looking forward to more of these as well.
Ashley Willis, I'm the executive director of Pike County Economic Development Corporation, and I'm just happy that everyone's here today. This is a super event to coordinate with the chamber and hosted here at the Tech Center. So excited to help get these businesses off the ground.
It's hard to follow that. Good afternoon. My name is Chaz Patrick. I am a healthcare navigator with Support Services for Veteran Families. Yes, I know it's a mouthful, but just to keep it short, we support or help homeless veterans that are at risk of being homeless or near homeless. And we cover 15 of the counties. So west, east, all to the south. This is one of my hats anyway, but to keep it consistent, really excited about this opportunity. I've been in numerous seminars before that deals with entrepreneurship, and I think I may be ready to take a little bit of stuff forward. I'm getting a little bit older, and I'm coming to find out that my talents or my gifts, I'm not using my gifts effectively to make money. And I guess the thing I would want to really specialize in is professional public speaking, because I realize that there are some areas that aren't tapped into that really can maximize the opportunities here in the region and in the state. So.
My name is Sherry Sabella. I am a newspaper reporter for our local newspaper, the Press Dispatch. And my husband and I have also been brainstorming about different ideas about how to do a side gig, anywhere from, I make really good homemade salsa and marketing that at like the different vendor fairs and farmers markets, things like that, to having a food truck, to having a greenhouse. So we're kind of just trying to throw out different ideas to figure out which one we want to pursue.
I know someone in the greenhouse. if you-
Really,
You didn't bring any salsa with you, did you?
I did not.
Taste test.
It's really good.
I wonder what for today.
It would be really good.
I'm Dan Johnson, I'm 32. Got a son that's 11. I've been an outdoorsman for pretty much most of my life. She can vouch for that, she can vouch for that. And I'm wanting to start a business that kind of goes along with my passion. So over the years, I've kind of noticed how just there's kind of a lack of education and effort on the conservation side of the outdoors. And that's something that I want to tie into, be able to educate landowners and help them to establish a plan, to implement the plan, and to meet their needs, whether that's creating pollinator habitat, creating habitat that will benefit somebody just because they want to improve the wildlife, or just because they want to see wildlife. Or if you're on a hunting aspect, you know, kind of develop that ground to where, okay, we're going to develop a plan for you to meet the needs that you don't currently have and make this successful for you. And on that aspect, it seems like, and we're all guilty of it, you know, you see the next big gadget or thing that's out there and available, and you're like, well, I'm going to put all this money into it and I'm going to be successful. I'm going to take the easy road. And it's just not the case. I mean, you literally got to start at the ground level. And with what I'm wanting to do, you literally have to start at the ground level, you know, to make this happen. So that's what I'm looking at doing. Like I said, I've had a passion for it forever. And, you know, the last couple of years, I've kind of had friends and stuff. It's kind of, you know, you need to do something like this. You need to take it a step further. And they talked about different ideas to me. And I'm like, well, you know, that's not really realistic. And with this, it kind of takes who I am as a whole. You know, I try to do the right thing, you know, and have strong morals and all those things. And so I can benefit everybody with this business that I'm wanting to do. But now on the other side, it's a market that's kind of untouched, it's untapped. So when you look at, you know, trying to compare and figure out numbers and all that stuff, you know, it's new territory. So I'm here to, you know, try to get more understanding and so.
You say your name is Dan?
Yes, sir.
My name is Kevin Malone. My parents started Joe Mama's Pizza back in the 80s, and I brought it to Petersburg in the mid-90s. And then since I think we sold it in 2008, now I'm kind of back helping Randy Harris get it going. He just bought everything, and I'm helping him. And I've since volunteered internship with Red Cross for a while, and that's where I met Don. But I'm getting ready to graduate my graduate's excuse me, my graduate's degree in social work, and I'm wanting to kind of combine social work with the restaurant business and help disabled people get experience in work and
That'd be good.
get there, you know,
Very interesting.
get there and also
You solve a problem.
kind of combine them. Try to.
That's
It's,
cool.
It's not work.
They're all cool, but that was I.
Volunteer. Volunteer with the Special Olympics and stuff, and that's kind of,
The feeling.
you know, got me thinking about, you know, combining the two. And I know there's a lot of disabled people work in the restaurant business, and it's really hard for them to really get started and train. 'Cause, you know, a lot of people in the restaurant, it's more of a fast paced kind of thing, and it's, you know, it's hard for them to keep up with the, you know, the demands of everything, but I'm trying to work on that.
It's a great idea.
Yeah.
Doesn't ask people online to.
I was gonna say, yeah, they might, they could.
Rena, would you mind coming off of mute and introducing yourself?
Yes, hi, my name is Rena, and I am from Princeton. My name is Rena Robal. My business is Peace of Mind Benefits. I have been in the business for a few years. Did my video come up? Because I could not see me.
Yep, we can see you.
Great. I have been working in investments and in health insurance since 2014, recently coming back to the state of Indiana in 2020, and then going independent myself, just myself, earlier this year, focusing in Medicare and also helping small businesses with their health insurance to be able to provide small businesses with an insurance or benefits option that's costing 30 to 50% less than the current small group policies that they currently have. So it's definitely helping out small businesses, and just returning to Indiana in 2020 and getting back into the market here earlier this year. When I found this opportunity this morning on LinkedIn, I was super excited to become part of you guys and and join in. So I'm excited about the networking that will be involved and the help that you guys do provide.
Great, thanks for joining us. Next up online is Joe Hadley.
Hello, I'm Joe Hadley. I am the manager at Parsifal Corporation in Petersburg, which is a relocation management company. And my family is in the beginning stages of starting up an auto relocation business. So I'm very thankful that you're recording this so that I'll be able to share with everyone that's involved. But that's all I have for now.
Thanks, Joe. Aaron Hadley.
I think that's his mother.
Yeah.
He is at work, and he sent me a message that he got called outside. So
Okay.
he's dropped out for a while. I don't know if he'll be able to rejoin or not.
Okay, you can watch it later too. Then last is Anna Mason. Anna, if you're talking, you're on mute. All right, well, hopefully you're still with us. We'll go ahead and have Doug introduce himself then.
Okay. My name is Doug Claiborne. I am a business advisor with the Small Business Development Center. I've approaching 9 years in doing this. Previously, I worked in banking for about 30 years. I say the previous organization I worked for, Citizens Bank, a lot of people are too young to remember that. Citizens Bank was a large regional holding company, and was purchased by Fifth Third So I worked 20 years for Citizens Bank and 10 years for Fifth Third, so 30 years in banking. And so when I left, I didn't want to quit working. And I was encouraged to look into being a business advisor. And I'm so happy that I did, because it has put me in touch with a lot of really, really great people, and to be able to use some of the skills that I learned in banking to help people who are wanting to start businesses. So yeah, we've really had a good opportunity to meet and see a lot of new businesses start, and help a lot of existing businesses through some challenges. So I enjoy doing what I'm doing, and I really enjoy doing these kind of launching your own business seminars too. So yeah.
Thanks, Doug. So I'm Dominic Pogge, and I'm the Regional Director of the Southwest Indiana Small Business Development Center. It's a mouthful, but I joined this organization in June of last year, and I'm very fortunate to walk into just an incredible team that includes Doug, but also 2 other business advisors currently. We are searching for a 4th part-time business advisor, so if you happen to know of anyone that might be looking for that kind of work, I'd love to talk to them. But I was with the Red Cross, as Kevin mentioned, prior to this, as a disaster program manager, covering 38 counties. The last 2.5 years with the Red Cross, I was based out of Evansville, so covered the tri-state area and the lower third of Indiana. Prior to that, I was with various startups in the for-profit world. As a highlight, was a first employee with a brand new company that was spun out of the Northwestern Kellogg School of Management. And really helped them get from 0 to $1 million in annual revenue within their first year. So saw this opportunity as a perfect blend of all the experience I've had to date, and just really happy to be here. And thank you guys for joining us today as well. So a quick housekeeping thing for the folks online. I do see that you're muted, so thank you for doing that. Please let us know if you're having any issues with the audio. And feel free to come off of mute and ask a question along the way, just as if you were participating here in the room. So with that, we'll get started on the next one here. I'll get you.
Go back. Yeah, I skipped a slide here, and I want to make sure we do some housekeeping, because it is important to give you an idea of what our agenda is, and we try to stick by it as much as we can, but we do stay fluid. If we've got an issue that we think needs to be discussed, then I think we'll spend some time with it. So roughly, we'll try and stay by this, but also, not that I've been here before, but I did notice the restrooms are just outside this door on the left. If you need to get up and go, feel free to do that. It is very relaxed, so don't feel like we're too formal, and that we can kind of keep moving and want to stay to where we can get you out of here at a time that you expect to be out of here. So there's our agenda. Just to kind of expand on what we said a minute ago about our staff, Don alluded to the other business advisor, Julie Foltz. Has a background in manufacturing. She's a Purdue trained engineer who halfway through her career at Meade Johnson, Bristol Myers, decided I want to get into marketing. So she's got a very unique combination of talents as an engineer who also knows marketing. So we're very, very blessed to have her, and she's just a sweet human being too, and very anxious to help and work with people. Grant came to us a couple of years ago after a long career, over 30 years in public accounting with a Big Four accounting agency. And so he's very valuable in the way of the financial aspect of businesses and understanding the accounting expenses and income formula. So he's really a good resource. Wendy Neal is our admin, and Wendy, if you've contacted our office to become a client and be advised, she's probably the first line that you'll talk to. And so she's an engaging personality and someone that can kind of get you squared away and where you need to go with our office. So that's kind of our staff. And you met Jim as well, who shares space. We are in the Innovation Point building. And if any of you are familiar with downtown Evansville, along the walkway, we're kind of the colorful building that sits between the block of 3rd and 4th Street, where we have co-work space and a number of other elements in that building. There's some space available in there, actually. But we share space with what is now known as the Evansville Regional Economic Partnership, right?
I'm gonna get that straight, because it's about a year ago, almost a year ago last week, or this
E-rep
week.
for short.
Yeah, E-rep. I still call Chamber of Commerce. But they do the chamber function, but it's also the economic development people. And it was a wise coming together and merging of people and resources to create E-rep, rather than having really two economic development arms working kind of concurrently to come together and kind of use that synergy. And it really, really is a benefit for us, because we are all about small business, and the chamber has always been about small business. And so we are very, very much in tune with what each other's doing. And so chamber, E-rep representatives that are in member development see a new business that might have some challenges and say, we have a resource for you. In addition to what all we offer, we also have the Small Business Development Center. And likewise, when we work with a small business that's starting up, we can refer them to membership and all the benefits that come with that. And so as we move into communities like we do here in Pike County and Perry County and Knox and Gibson, or all around.
Spencer?
Yeah, Spencer, we want to do the same. And so we want to work in partnership with the chamber and help businesses to know that beyond the resources that we can provide, that we'll try and tell you a little more about here today, there are some resources that the chamber can offer and the economic development people. And so it's nice to be in partnership with you as well. So that helps you to understand a little bit more about us. What specifically is the SBDC, Small Business Development Center? A lot of people don't realize this is a resource that's available throughout the entire country. It was put into place by the Small Business Administration, I think 30 years ago, somewhere around that. And they decided to fund that. And I think it's one of the wisest things that has come along, because they realized the important function economically that small business does. I mean, we would not be anything if all we were big Dell and General Motors and all these big corporations. They do a lot of good things and create good products and services, but small business is what drives the economy. And until we had this resource to help foster and help those people get into business, there really wasn't a resource. So along with the Small Business Administration Guaranteed Loan Fund that worked in conjunction with banks, this Small Business Development Center came alongside to offer advising at no cost, a lot of resources, which we'll talk about more as we go ahead, all at no cost. And it's just amazing to me that I worked in banking for 30 years and known that this resource was here, but didn't realize until I came on board that it's free. And I hesitate to use that word because they don't want us to use that word. It's at no cost. Nothing in the world is free, but the resources as well. And it just blew my mind. So we'll talk about that a little bit more, but we, as you see, their business planning, access to capital, which is basically loan money, and how do you get that, and market research, budgeting, accounting help, and just basically a lot of the time we spend is with clients that say, I want to do this, but I need some help, both in what do I need to do, and also I need some help financially. And so we try and explain what's involved in that, and we can talk a little more of that as we go along. Helping to package your business plan and your financial projections for a loan request. So that's pretty much Small Business Development Center. Also within the state, we have there's a total of 11 offices, is that right? So we're located all throughout the state, and some are aligned with universities, and we're fortunate enough to be aligned with the E-rep, where I think I really like that partnership. So with that, we'll step into part one and talk about self-assessment, because I would dare say that anybody that decides to start a business probably should, if you haven't, look at yourself very closely. Look at, I love what you said a while ago, your gifts, your talents, understand what it is that you have, understand what you have to offer, what you have learned in life, and how that can help translate into maybe running a business. It's more than just a desire to pursue a certain avenue. You want to be able to say, I want to go somewhere where I can utilize the talents that I have and the gifts that I've been given, because you're going to be a lot more successful that way. Yeah, I've been proven wrong before, but one guy in particular came to me one time and he said, I said, what do you want to do? He said, I want to open a pizza shop. I said, what have you been doing? Because he was probably in his late 50s, early 60s. He said, I've been a plumber my whole life. I said, so tell me how that equates to pizza ownership. He said, I just know it. I've eaten pizza my whole life. And I said, it's more than that. You know, we had a long discussion, but he embarked on that journey and he has been successful. That's been probably 6 years ago. So he turned it into a pretty good little business. So I do understand that you don't always have to go the way where you have talents, but it probably is going to spell success a lot more often than you think. So anyway, with that, keep up with myself here. So we're going to talk a little bit about, will I pass up our mission? Oh, okay. One last thing about the SBDC. We have a positive measurable impact on the formation, growth, and sustainability of small businesses in Indiana and to develop a strong entrepreneurial community. And as I mentioned, the Indiana Small Business Development Center is who we are a part of, but there are small business development centers throughout the country. So there is a small business development center, America's Small Business Development Center, which is a national organization that kind of organizes and helps provide resources to all the different ones throughout the country. So, all right, so self-assessment involves identifying your personal objectives, your skills, your resources. And so where do you start? I mean, you could sit down and take a blank notebook and start writing things down, but this process that we're going to take you through here is a really helpful thing. We talk about how personal objectives. So if you look and you're looking at your booklet, page 6 talks about identifying your personal objectives. And I won't go through this exercise here. It's something you can take with you. But I will point out, as I kind of alluded to a minute ago, consider how you satisfy your wants and needs when you consider what you want to go into. I love hearing what you all were talking about, why you chose the direction you did. You have a very strong personal interest. You have a personal interest in people with special needs, and being able to transfer that to a business model is great because you'll have passion as you go down that road. You have kids, you have a passion for kids, that's really important. It helps you get up each morning and not feel like I have this mundane job to do. I did this because it's something I want to do, and you're going to be better at it for that. So what are the other things that you have to think about in addition to your wants and needs? Because that's only part of it. I'll go through a couple of these, but take time to go through this and think about it in your own time. But something like when you're working, punching the clock or working as a salary, typically you get vacation time. And that's pretty important. A lot of people put that at the top of their list, like, well, what's the salary? And do I get vacation? Do I get paid holidays? When you own a business, you can scratch that, at least for the foreseeable future. And that's important. I mean, it's really important to think about. You give that up. It doesn't mean that you don't always work without a vacation. It just may be a while. I have real close friends who own businesses, and I've asked them, how long was it when you started a business before you actually took a vacation? And one guy said it was about 5 or 6 years. And when I did, I left on a Friday and came back on a Sunday night because I didn't feel comfortable leaving my business. And so it was a while before they could hand the keys to someone. So it's important to think about that and work through that emotionally. What can I do? And every business model is different. Each one, it may afford you more opportunity, especially if you're going in as a partnership. You can take turns running the business. If your partner is your spouse, then it may make it difficult for both of you go on vacation together, but it's just an important thing. The same as pulling a regular check, working, punching the clock, earning a salary is pretty great for budgeting and paying bills, because that, as long as you work, you're gonna get paid, and you can pay your mortgage, you can pay your car payment, you can pay your utilities, you can pay your insurance and all those things. When you're working for yourself, it's not necessarily a regular paycheck. You may have a great explosion out of the gate and making good money, and 6 months into it, it's like, what happened? Where'd all the business go? You may have those, and most businesses will. It's very rare that you don't have those dry periods where what happened? What did I do wrong? And it's just the cycles that things go through. So having a regular income, if that's really, really important, it may be something that may pause to think about a little bit more. The one there says that I'm comfortable with uncertainty. That's important. The one line I hear a lot of is, I asked somebody, what prompted you to want to get into a business for yourself? And it's, well, I'm tired of working for the man or the woman, or whoever. I just want to be my own boss. And I said, wait a minute. If you start your own business, it doesn't matter what that is. You're online sales, you're a restaurant, you're a daycare, you are a manufacturer. Everybody that you sell your product or service to is going to be your boss. So now you've traded in that one boss you didn't want to have to answer to, for everybody that you do business with is now going to dictate what you do. And so you got to stop and think about that. It isn't that simple. So anyway, those are some really good perplexing questions, not perplexing, but they're good thought-provoking questions that everybody who starts to go down the road should stop for a minute and say, I need to cover this. I need to know that that's what I'm dealing with. So those are your personal objectives. Then you talk about your skills and experience. What does that look like? Does it mean you know your weak points? How many of you could say, if you sit down, what are your weak points? Could you jot those down? Are you willing to admit them, especially to yourself? It's good to understand what that is and say, okay, I know what it is. How do I overcome that? And it could be something like, I start a business that requires accounting knowledge. I've never done that before. I don't have any knowledge in that area. What am I going to do? There are QuickBooks, which is fairly easy to learn. Or it could be, I just have to hire somebody to do that for me. And so that's an important thing to think about. You know, you want to be good at what you do. You want to use the skills you have. But if you are not good at something, you either have to learn that skill, or you have to have someone in your corner at your side that can do that for you. And so it's good to know what are those skills that are needed, and what ones do I have that I can benefit from. But what are the characteristics of a successful entrepreneur? You know, I mentioned earlier, I loved the fact that you all kind of went a direction where your passion is. You have to be passionate. I mean, that's without a doubt, you have to be passionate at what it is you're wanting to do. It's probably well known that you need to be a risk taker. That doesn't mean that you're someone that's reckless, but it's a smart risk taker. You're taking risk anytime you open a business, especially if you look at SBA data that says, sadly, 9 out of 10 businesses that start will fail. That's a pretty sobering thought. And I'm not saying that for you all to say, oh, no, I better not do this. I just want you to know the true facts that are out there and say, okay, I don't want to be that statistic. I want to be the 1 out of 10 that is good. Yeah.
Quick question. What time frame is that?
That's a good question. I remember seeing that data, and we used to include it in our packet, but I don't think we do anymore. The top 10 reasons why may vary from something right out of the gate where they're not able to budget, to another one right out of the gate. I don't enter into business without enough what's the word? Working capital. You know, I've used everything that I have, every resource to get in business and buy my inventory and buy my equipment, and now I've got 0 and I'm starting out. That ain't gonna work. You got to have some working capital because there's going to be lean times. So it could be a variety of things that could come right out of the gate, or it could be something a couple years in that you didn't keep up with the market. You didn't see the market shifting. But I would say probably the majority of those are early on. They just didn't do their homework and didn't do what was required to get prepared and manage. And we'll talk about some of those, but that is a good question. I'm sorry, I can't answer it definitively, but I think primarily it's those first 6 to 12 months is where a lot of them fail. Now, some are later, but yeah. You need to be a decision maker. You need to be a cost controller. How many of you would say that you are that? You control costs pretty well. Okay. And the good part about that, the important part about that is to understand what are my costs, really understand what are my expenses going to be, because that's to your question earlier. What are the things that are going to throw me for a curve? It's like, I didn't anticipate that cost. You need to really, and that's where we try to help bounce stuff off of people to say, if you put together cost projection or cost and income projection, did you anticipate everything? Did you leave something out? I say you need to be a good marketer, but you don't really have to be that anymore if you've got somebody working for you that can do that task. And that could come as simply as social media marketing or some organized marketing through an ad agency. Definitely you need to be financially responsible. You can't be reckless. And it goes without saying, you got to be a hard worker and someone who's willing to overcome obstacles. That's critical. And some people are better suited to do that than others. I take that analogy to sports because that's what I did when I was growing up, played ball, and coaches who are driving athletes to do better. They can see right away who's a hard worker and who's not. And you're reminded of that daily in practice. And so you early on, put it in the back of your mind, I want to be a hard worker, and it carries over to your business life. It doesn't mean that athletes are the ones going to be good in business. It's not that, because everybody does things that trigger that. But that was one for me that triggered you better, and your parents obviously, work hard, keep your nose clean, and you'll be fine. Work hard was always the first thing stated. So it's important to be that, but especially for people who own their own business. So then we talk about, identifying your personal skills and experience. If you look at page 8, I really like that list. And again, that's something you can do in your own time, but I think it's really important. Remember, I said earlier, you need to know how to do a lot of things, or agree with yourself that I need to learn that. I need to get training to understand that better. Or if I simply cannot or don't want to do that, then I'm going to have someone on board with me that will do that. So that's the 3 things that I think as you're going down through these, establish and maintain financial records right at the top of the list. Some people may say, oh, that's like kryptonite to me, and I can't do that. I need to get somebody to do that for me. That's fine, just to understand that that's a task that needs to get done. And so you go down through and take your time and go through that. It's a good list to work through. So step 3, looking at your personal financial resources, and we'll talk about that more a little bit later when we get to the part about banking. And let me just get a show of hands, maybe those of you who feel like to do what you want to do, you're going to have to obtain some type of outside financing. So most of you. So we'll talk a little more in detail as we go towards the end of this session today and talk more about conventional bank financing, so you kind of know what's involved there. But you need to sit down and understand, how do you do that? There are certain things that are required, and a lot of times that's just a projection, income and expense projection, to try and map out how much do I think I'm going to make month by month by month, and then what are the accompanying expenses that go with that: cost of inventory, cost of labor, cost of utilities, and all the things that come with it. The fact that you're budgeting yourself for a year, 2 years, 3 years out, and that's what banks are going to want to see. So I'll glance over a couple of these things, but we're going to spend a little bit more later. But in that vein, a personal financial statement is something. Anybody familiar with that? Have you been to a bank or understand? Personal financial statement is pretty much a snapshot of where you are personally. And it's like, well, we're talking about my business, not me personally. But if you're talking to a lender, which I was once, that way you handle your personal finances is going to mirror how you do with your business. So that's why banks are so intent on seeing, what do you have on hand? How much money do you have in the bank? What is your income? What do you have stocks and bonds, other cash convertible assets, a vehicle, a home, vacation property, all the stuff that lists, okay, that's my total assets. And then what do I owe on that home, on my auto, on my boat, on whatever, student loan, credit cards. And so you take my total assets and you subtract liabilities, and that's your net worth. And very clearly, very quickly, a bank can see the term that was always you're upside down because you have more liabilities than you do assets. That's not ever good. So it's a quick way to see. And then the rest of that form on pages 11 and 12 kind of goes into detail more about what your personal assets and liabilities are. So everybody that goes to a bank will be asked to do that. And they typically, banks have their own form that they give you, but their logo on it that says, there you go run and do that, and include that with your package that we're going to talk about later, your business plan and financial projections. So, so with that, we'll move on to the business idea, and I'll turn it over to Dom to kind of go more into that.
Sure. So we're on page 13 now in your participant guide. So if we just take a minute to look at what's listed on here, I'm going to cover steps 4 through 9. I thought we might just start with like having you guys take a quick look at that list and see, do you feel like there's an area that jumps out at you as needing more help than maybe another area? That's describing your product or service, describing your customer, describing your competition, sales and distribution process, management requirements, developing a sales forecast. Do any of those jump out at you guys as like, oh yeah, I really need a lot of help in this area?
Step 9, maybe.
Okay,
That's kind of.
developing sales forecast, okay. Anything else jumping out at anybody?
I'm more step 10.
Okay. Startup expenses,
I'm with her, and him partially.
okay. The reason I ask is we could spend a little more time in a certain area if you guys would find it beneficial. I'm just kind of talking that through. So I will work through them in order. And as you probably figured out by now, we're not trying to actually do everything in this workbook during this class. We're more or less trying to kind of review some of the high points in certain areas and things to think about as you're working through this. And, you know, as I learned about this class when I joined the organization, one of the things that kind of occurred to me in the way that this workbook is structured is you're essentially creating your business plan as you're working through a lot of what's in here. And, you know, a formal business plan is something that can easily emerge if you're taking the steps that are in this workbook. So if we're talking about describing your product or service, some of this is kind of geared towards, you know, if you're a brand new business, you know, for childcare, a business that you're kind of buying, you're not already, you know, thinking about what is my image going to be, where we're going to be located, what's our facility like, because that's already kind of in place for you. But still some important aspects to consider, you know, thinking about how approachable is my business, right? You know, what's the curb appeal that people are seeing, you know, when they pull up to my business, how do they feel about it? Does it inspire confidence that I can take care of your child all day, or does it make people a little bit, you know, question it, right? So there are certain things that you want to consider, right?
And don't look at my 4 kids.
Yeah.
They're hellions.
There you go. So just thinking about all the different aspects of, like, you know, someone with fresh eyes, how are they going to view my business, whether it's a storefront, but even, you know, more kind of abstractly, if it's a service, you know, what does my presence look like online to someone? You know, where are the places that they're going to look to see that I'm credible for doing what I'm doing? We started talking with a QuickBooks consultant to potentially help some of our clients. And in that process, one of the things I did was I looked everywhere, all over online, that I could find him. I Googled his name, his company name, to really vet him and see, like, you know, does he have a legitimate web presence? He's got his own website, which is great. You know, you create a website pretty easily these days, but, you know, he's on the Intuit website for QuickBooks and listed as a QuickBooks Pro consultant. He has a couple of reviews on there at least, and has some Google Maps reviews for his business. So really trying to kind of look at, you know, what does that image look like to people? And, as we're talking about some of these other things, you're going to be looking at competition, and, those are some of the things that you might be looking to for cues, as well as to what might be important for my business to project as an image to the marketplace. One of the other key questions I like to cover on this page 14 here is, are these products or services already available in the market? If so, where? If not, why not? I think in the folks that I've worked with, there are sometimes people think that, hey, if I'm going to start a new business, I have to have this brand new blockbuster idea. I got to have the next Google or the next Facebook, right? Something that doesn't exist. Well, the reality is that most new businesses are actually just doing what other people are already doing anyway. You can go into the plumbing business and be successful, even though plumbing's been around for decades, right? So you don't always have to have a brand new blockbuster idea. And in fact, seeing that there's already competition in place is a good indicator that there's a market for what you're trying to sell and that you can be successful. If you're not seeing anybody already doing that, there's a big question as to, well, why? Why isn't that in place already? And it's not to say that, you shouldn't do it. It's more just, you want to make sure you really understand the reasons behind why, nobody's currently addressing that need. Maybe they have tried and failed. So you want to understand, okay, well, what led to their failure? Are those things that I can compensate for in my business model? The second to last one on here, in terms of the type of labor and skills I'll need to run my business, how will they find them in my area? Doug was talking a lot about this on page 8, that grid there of thinking about, okay, do I have the skills for this? Will someone else do it? Do we need training for it? So really taking stock of your own skills, but also thinking about, when you're a business owner, what do you want to be actually working on day to day? Sure, you may know how to do accounting, but is that something you really want to do, right? So you need to factor in, okay, well, I don't really want to be responsible for that. I'm going to need to hire for it. And then that's going to translate into your financial projections to make sure that you've accounted for those costs, in the short and long term. If you're going to look at hiring people for certain aspects, you want to make sure that you're going to be able to hire for them, or you've got a good chance that you could. These days with websites like Upwork, you can potentially outsource some tasks to people online that are willing to do certain things for cheap that can be done online. So there are other ways to address some of the things that are going to need to happen within your business. Moving to page 15. So we're talking about, actually the last question on here was, are there other services or products that I could offer to increase my lines of business? A lot of times what we encourage folks to think about are different revenue streams. What other ways could you potentially add value to the customers that you've already grabbed some valuable attention from? What are other things you might be able to sell them as an add-on service, or another product that they might say, oh yeah, actually I kind of need that. I have kids, and I actually saw an ad for diaper genie refills, and I was like, oh man, that'd be cool if you could just pick those up at the daycare. I don't know, just things like that could potentially be integrated.
Amazon delivers, by the way.
What's that?
Amazon delivers.
Yes, they do.
So
So
Well, I need this week.
My kids are too old. What's diaper genie?
Oh.
we don't
You know
actually
what a
have,
diaper genie is?
Oh, it's like a tall skinny trash can that you put the diaper in, it locks there's no scent.
Oh.
Can't smell it yet.
They
You guys
didn't have
know
those
what,
when my kids do.
does everybody here know what an NAICS code is? You guys heard of that? So it stands for North American Industry Classification System, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong there. It basically outlines the industry that you're in, and finding that code for your particular business. You may have multiple codes if you're doing different things, but knowing what those codes are for your business can help you identify market research. So one of the things that we can help do is pull market research reports to help you understand different businesses and their operations, and your competition. So you look that up by the NAICS code, depending on the business that you're in. We brought some sample reports along with us that you can take a look at as well. But that's kind of something you'll just want to look for and note and write down and maybe useful to you at some points in the future as you're looking at different resources and may need to do some additional research. So moving to page 16, now we're talking about describing your customer. Do you guys feel like you've got your customers, like who they are, described in detail? Do you either have it written down or a good picture of that in your head? Childcare, it's probably easy, but something like conservation education, have you really thought through and written down sort of who your customers are?
I mean, it's so broad. I mean, it can go from the average Joe that just wants to see more squirrels or rabbits in their yard to somebody that owns several thousand acres as a lease and they're wanting a very extensive management plan. And like you were talking about a while ago with different revenue streams, I talked to Ashley a few weeks ago and that kind of got my mind rolling on it. So it's not necessarily one certain audience. It's anyone at all in general that's wanting to improve their habitat around their ground. Like she owns, how many acres? You guys own 30? 20. So if she wanted, say, well, I don't see squirrels or I don't see this, or I don't like that there's a lot of invasive species on my ground, and maybe she's not wanting it for, a hunter standpoint, but she's wanting something that she can leave behind for her kids. Well, that would be different than somebody else, with a different need. So in a sense, my target audience, it's broad. So I guess my question would be, how do I narrow that down specifically?
Sure.
Just
Yeah,
categorize each different one.
I think you illustrate a good point, and something you might consider doing is developing personas or profiles of what are the 2 or 3 ideal customers for your type of business. What are the attributes about them? How old are they? How many acres do they own? Where do they live? What are things they care about? Pretty much make up a character in your mind and write down those attributes. And of course, not everyone's going to fit into those buckets, right? But it helps you to focus then on who you think those top 2 or 3 customer personas are. And then when you're thinking about other decisions, like how you're going to market to them, it can help you steer some of that direction to say, oh, well, a common place that all 3 of these are is, they all attend farmers markets, for example. That could be one commonality. And then you might say, oh, well, maybe it's important for me to be at the farmers markets then with a table and just talking about what I do. So just kind of a way to help think about, yeah, you've got broad appeal, but maybe there's some buckets in that broad spectrum of primary buyers of your particular product or service.
Well, one thing I shared with Daniel that I don't know if he knew was the introduction to Jim. I actually wanted to make, because I could see some connection with like the invasion of the Bradford pear tree, for example, all across I-69, and what's the opportunity for him? I don't know what those government contracts look like, but I could see some synergies there. So
Is there a concerted effort to get rid of them?
DNR issues solicitations, who's your national forest for invasive species work. Most of what I've seen is along highways and stuff, but there are a lot of solicitations that come out of the Hoosier National Forest. So depending on, what your focus is.
Yeah, personas aren't always people. They're, businesses potentially as well. So they're,
Who doesn't need invasive species assistance?
And that brings up a good point, to what we were talking about earlier. If you go down 231, you leave from Santa Claus and you head towards Owensboro, I mean, all that you see on both sides of the road is, salary pear, which is Bradford pear. And it's not something that's just happened this year. That's been going on. And, the destruction that they have on your soils and your native habitat is awful. You take a barren field and you don't touch it. That's what it becomes. You can go out here on 57? And we out of town, Petersburg, and there's a I think it's right past White Seed Company. You look on the left, there's a great big hillside. And it's nothing but Bradford pears. You know, and that was originally just a barren field. So when you look at several miles going down the interstate between Santa Claus and Owensville, you have these pear trees pollinating on both sides. Well, what happens when the wind hits those? You know, and they have seeds on them. Where do they go? Yeah, if the wind doesn't hit them and you have semis driving by, it's going to grab and turn. So, you know, that should be a huge focus point in Indiana. From the research that I've done, it doesn't seem like it's that much of a concern, you know, to be honest with everyone in here. Because when you've got trees that's this big around, have been there for several years on our, you know, NDOT's right away, highway. And what are they doing to control that? And, you know, along with what I'm wanting to do, there's a lack of education. You know, the more I've dove into this and kind of filling the gaps on what I know, it's like, man, people just really don't understand the impact that we are just letting happen, you know. And it's not just, you know, Bradford pears. I mean, there's other ones out there. But if we don't get a control on them, I mean, you know, the forests that we love, they're not going to be the same. You know, what you leave your grandkids, what I leave my grandkids, it ain't going to look like that out there. No, it's not. It'll be few and far between.
It's just sad that they didn't intervene when, I mean, I know this has been around for a while, but one of the biggest proliferators were residential development. A lot of home builders chose Bradford pears because they grow fast, they flower, they look pretty, and all these subdivisions started putting Bradford pears, and birds eat the seeds and drop them along the highway, and they proliferate. It's just sad, but yeah, it definitely needs to be addressed, especially those of us with allergies.
They were thought to be dormant when we first got them, where you plant this and, you know, it's not going to reproduce. Now, a lot of these that you guys see off the side of the road, whether you know this or not, you know, they're turning back in their native state. So they've got thorns and stuff that are this long on. So, and then they're pollinated, breeding. So
I've got a question. When you were talking earlier,
yes,
does your business model have a name like Don was saying earlier, the NAICS code, NAICS? What would you call it? What is it called across the country?
I don't think there is one. I know that there is.
I mean, I didn't know it was a thing. I mean, it sounds great. I like what you're doing. I just didn't know if it had a name, but we could possibly find an Ibis World report that might zero down to who are, or what do the clients look like? You know, how do you describe your customer?
With this being new, I don't necessarily know that there is something that's wanting to meet all of these different needs that I have. I mean, I want to go on your property and I can do as much as you want done to it, you know, and make it absolutely something great, meets your needs, that you're going to leave behind forever. Now, there are businesses that sort of cater small parts of this, like there may be a habitat development, you know, business where, you know, we can do certain parts of what I want to do. I know that in Michigan, there's a guy, and I reached out to talk to him to kind of get an idea on my business. What he does is he goes in and, like, let's say you're a hunter and you've got 50 acres for, you know, a cheap fee of $3,000. He'll come out and look at your ground and tell you all these things you need to do, and he'll develop a plan for you. But he doesn't implement all that. But he will tell you, you know, how to do it, and then you can hire somebody to come out and implement it, or you can use your own equipment. You know, I'm wanting to develop that plan and then do the work, and not just look at it as a, you know, benefit for hunters, but a benefit for anyone and everyone. So that way we can start making a difference and getting Indiana back to the native grounds and improving it for wildlife. You know, another thing too is, you know, you look at soil erosion and agriculture fields, and if you've ever stood out in a field, you know, playing baseball on a summer day, how hot is it? You know, you don't have any shade trees. Then you go out and what's the first thing you want to do when you're hot? You want to go up underneath the tree and cool off. Well, imagine how cool it is in a forest compared to how cool it is to own a 20-acre forest, 20-acre field. You know, how much heat, you know, coolness is that, you know, affecting, you know, the air and everything around you. So, and we're just taking out more and more woods. I'm sure in, you know, everyone's lifetime in here, you guys have seen where there was a high amount of fence rows, you know, going through woods, you know, going between fields where you see these just great big trees, and now they're all being taken out. Well, there's a lot of wildlife that thrive in that, you know, and we're doing more harm than good. And this is something that I've, you know, been around my whole life. I see the changes. You know, I love being outdoors. You know, yesterday I walked 6 miles. The day before, you know, 5 or 6. I've been laid off another job. So I go, and this is something I have a passion for. So I've seen the changes, and, you know, I know what habitats are good for, you know, whatever you're looking for. There's no master's degree you can get that's got the knowledge that I've had from just being hands-on in it almost my whole life. So, yeah, in a way, like you were asking, I know I've got way off subject here, and we're really time lapse, so I'll just some of that. But I don't know where I could find, you know, someone that's wanting to.
I just looked it up, and it sounds like it could be a mix between horticulturist and botanist. Does that sound right?
I was Googling, I was thinking natural resource management, and I Googled NICS code and there's one environment conservation and wildlife organizations, 813312. So they're usually NICS codes can be broad. It may not be specifically what you do, but they may have 50 descriptions underneath it. So
okay,
basically natural resource management is what we're talking about. Land, water, plants, animals.
Did you have a question?
This conversation just makes me think of a conversation I had with Julie Foles one time. There was a gentleman who, he was like in construction and just has like a wide variety of skills that he can do. And he just found himself being kind of exhausted because it seemed like he was getting a certain type of customers, which he could do those skills and he was making money, but it wasn't necessarily exactly in alignment with what he felt the most passionate about. So when you're trying to think of like who you want your customers to be, it seems like you are very passionate about the education piece, but then also helping planning and implementing. And I mean, we're all only one person. So just depending on how large of a company or business you want to have and how many employees, you know, I think it's important to think about who you want those customers to be. And then obviously long-term wise to have maybe plans to expand, but yeah, just things to consider.
Great point. Thanks, guys. Next question to highlight on this page 16 here is why will customers buy my products or services? It's important to understand some of the motivations. You know, do people need this? Is it a luxury? Is there status involved in this purchase? Really understanding the motivations of some of those personas that you might develop. Is your market growing or declining? I hear Doug talk about this frequently, especially when we look at market research, to understand, you know, is there growth in that market? And if so, that's great, because when you go for financing and a banker sees that, you know, that gives them the confidence that, okay, you're in a place that's actually growing instead of shrinking, and it's probably going to be more successful in, you know, the growth context. We can help you with some of the market research to identify those trends. But, you know, for something like bricks and mortar, you're going to have to look at like your general area, you know, what's the trend on that area in terms of population growth and that kind of thing. And in fact, one of the reports that I brought with us today, if you guys want to take a look at it at some point, is it's a 3-ring demographic report, it's called. So I did it on this address here. And it gives you basically consumer demographics for 5, 25, and 50-mile radius from this point. So you can see how many households there are, income levels, age groups, and it can really, you know, help you understand, you know, for a pizza place that's local, right? maybe you're dealing with the 5 mile ring or maybe a little bit broader than that. So, we can adjust that number when we run the report to be whatever radius it is that you think you're capturing customers from, and help you just understand what the demographics are. And then that can even feed into things like the personas that you might develop. The last question on this page is, how will my customers find out about my products or services? So just really thinking through all the different ways that people will find out about your business in particular. There's of course online presence, word of mouth, all different methods that people can find out about you. And it's important to think them through and try to judge, what are the primary methods, make sure that you're paying attention to those through your marketing. Let's see here. Let's move to page 18, describing your competition. So one of the ideas that is actually written in this book, and I think we talk about frequently with some folks, is when you're researching your competition, if you call the childcare business in town to ask them how their business is going and try to pick their brains, right? They're less likely to talk to you about it, right? But maybe you call in some other random town that, it's a similar sized place in a different part of the country. They might be willing to let you pick their brain and give you some insight as to what would we have done differently? What goes well for us? Where do we get hung up on things? So, don't be afraid to pick up the phone and just call people in another part of the country and see if they're, yeah, that's awesome. That's great. So you're really looking for, what are the strengths of your competitors? What are their weaknesses? And, where are they vulnerable? And are you maybe able to use that as an opportunity for your business to address a need that still exists in the community around that product or service? You can talk to customers of your competitors to get their perspective. You may even be, a customer of that competitor yourself already. So some of the ideas are to, shop a retail store if that's what you're looking to do. Shop it in your own market, but also maybe others, and do it on multiple occasions. Visit at different times of the day, and just try to really get a true sense of what's going on with that business. And imagine how it might apply to your own context.
It's where Facebook groups,
Mhm.
like those private pages, become very informative as well.
Yeah.
As far as owners, clients,
Mhm.
kids, curb appeal. I've learned a lot of do's and don'ts from pages.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Something that I learned early on that I didn't even realize till it came up. Somebody was wanting to do kids play type activity, like a miniature golf. And I said, do you know your competition is? And they said, yeah, there's no other miniature golf anywhere around. I said, no. It's so much broader than that. What do kids do? Kids from 3 to 15 or 18 or whatever, whoever that demographic was, what are they doing in their free time? They're going to the movie, they're going, there's a whole list of things. That's your competition. And so the point there is that when you're thinking about who you really truly need to be more broad than, you say daycare, that's pretty standard. You don't have a lot of competition outside of other daycare, but some businesses have competition you don't even think about. And, restaurants, and you say, well, I serve this type of food. There's no one else serving that type of, but people still go out to eat. And so anybody that serves food is going to be a competitor. So that's something to keep in mind too, that I've learned. You just really have to kind of dig more, and it may not affect all of you the same way, but it is an important thing to keep in mind.
Another source of good information is your chamber and economic development folks in your community. So glad that you're already talking, Dan, with Ashley about your idea. They've got a lot of insight into the community and understand some of the history and can help you pick up on things that you may not have known otherwise. The last couple on this page are how can I use the internet to support my business? So I'm glad you mentioned, the Facebook groups. That's a fantastic way to, research your competition, but also maybe use the internet to support your business, right? If you're active in a group and contributing, people might be wondering, oh, well, who's Cecily and what's she do? And, maybe we'll want to do business with her. And what does SBDC market research say about my industry in regard to my market area? For a lot of industries, we do have the ability to drill down to the state of Indiana or even the local region to provide specific data around, financial information, like, looking at gross sales for an industry and, all the costs involved in that type of business. So that when you're developing your own projection, which we'll talk a little bit about later, you can make sure that your guesses and assumptions are in line with what the industry already deals with, right? If you're saying, well, my cost of goods sold are going to be this, well, that's very different than what the industry standard is. Not that it's wrong, but you want to make sure that you really understand why. All right, so moving on to sales and distribution. So I think we're on page 21 for a lot of the questions around this area. So this section focuses on service businesses first. And the first question there is, can I initially operate this business out of my home? A lot of businesses can get started from home, and it's a great way to do that with minimizing your risk. You've got a lot less costs involved in doing that. Will it be a good idea? You've got to consider what else is going on at home and how's this business going to impact that, right? There's also requirements like for some areas, if you're going to run a salon out of your home, you have to have a separate entrance for that. So that might involve costs, even though you're not opening up your own, bricks and mortar store elsewhere. How can I best communicate with my customers? So, what types of promotional techniques are you going to use to reach them? One thing I like to highlight here is, especially if you're starting out, have you guys heard of Google Voice or virtual phone numbers? Kind of have an understanding of how those work. So Google Voice is a common one. They sell a product for business that's about, I think, $10 a month. And basically you get a virtual phone number that you can use for your business, and it can hook up to however many phones you wanted to forward to at once. So, Kevin, if you wanted the phone to ring 3 different people at the same time to pick up orders, you could choose to do that with a virtual phone number. We actually use them a lot at the Red Cross. The 24-hour support number was a Google Voice number that I set up. And it can be good to start that from the beginning, because then you've got the flexibility as you grow to make changes to that number. Who does it point to? When does it point to them? If you're an owner and going on vacation, you finally get one, right? You can toggle off ringing your phone for that week and have it just ringing the one person that you want to while you're gone. For some businesses, they really like to have somebody answering the phone, a real person answering when someone calls. So it comes in handy there because it can ring multiple people at the same time, and you've got a lot of flexibility in putting settings around that, toggling things on and off. So I highly recommend you look at a virtual phone number if you haven't established a phone number yet, or you can port a number into that kind of a system and take advantage of the benefits it has. How much space will my business need? So, if you're not buying something existing, you're starting off, going to need to really consider all the space that you need. One of the important aspects is, how much parking. In some places, there are local ordinances about how many parking spaces you need to have based on the square footage of your building. So making sure that you've accounted for some of those aspects as you're thinking about all the costs involved. Do you have to extend the parking lot to do what you're going to do? That can introduce some costs that you really haven't factored in yet. Doug was just telling me the other day about a client, or they were in the office and mentioned that HVAC equipment right now is on back order for a lot of folks. And, that seemed like, oh man, we all know that there's supply chain crunches right now, but it's for very specific things, right? So to know, hey, if I'm going to have to install a specialized HVAC system on this building, is it realistic for me to get it in the time frame that I'm looking to open here? Because it sounds like even for the Evansville School Corporation, you had said that they canceled an entire order because they weren't even going to get it this year. So, really thinking about, okay, yeah, maybe I got the money for this, but now is it even available? So some important factors to consider when you're thinking about timing and how you're going to do this. On page 22, I mentioned the zoning restrictions, so making sure that you've talked with your local municipalities, be it the township or the county, making sure that you're in compliance with anything that they've got that might be required. Considering on whether you want to own your location or lease. Doug, you could probably talk a lot more in depth about some of the advantages and disadvantages if that is an option for you to own. But in general, one of the things I've seen is that, if you need to make like a lot of permanent improvements to a building, you're going to need to own that facility, or, if that's not possible, really work with the landlord to try to get them to make those improvements. Because especially if you're going after financing, they're not going to want to see you sinking a lot of money into a building that you can't ultimately take with you if you should have to move, right? And then thinking through, will I have the option to renew my lease? You want to make sure that that option is actually written into your lease. That landlord may not own that building forever, right? That ownership might change hands, and that new owner may have different thoughts about what to do with that space. So making sure that you've got the right elements covered in your lease. The strong recommendation there is to really work with an attorney to review that and make sure it covers you in all the areas that you need to be covered. All right. Moving along, so page 25, we're talking about management requirements. So like Doug said, what's being your own boss look like, right? You no longer have one, you've got maybe hundreds of bosses because your customers are now your bosses. So really thinking through, if that is your motivation, is that really the right reason to do something like that? But then thinking more, on the ground about like, what's the day-to-day life of a business operator in that space? I'll never forget my first job in high school was I worked at Subway sandwiches, right? And I observed that the owner there, she really worked at this 60 hours a week and barely ever got a break. She was working at it constantly. And I just asked her one day, I said, how much are you making here? And she said, well, I make probably about $65,000 a year, but then I got to pay for healthcare and all of that. So when I thought about that, I was like, wow, is that really worth it? Maybe it is for her, but I had just, at that stage of my life, always assumed that if you were operating the business too and didn't have to pay a manager, you were making, north of 100,000 on a location like that, but just wasn't true. So really thinking through, like, are you going to be the operator of this business? Do you have to be the one running it? Are you going to be able to find good management to hire in the area so that you can step out of working in the business like that? And if you are going to work in the business, what's that day-to-day like? What are the things that you want to work on versus hire other people for or outsource? Like Doug mentioned earlier, thinking about the daily hours and whether you're going to have to work weekends and what impacts that has on your family. Obviously taking a vacation might not be in the question right away, but how's that going to also impact your family? You're going to be able to make it to ball games and take kids to practice, and what changes would you have to make in your life to be able to accommodate for that? When we talked earlier about thinking about your own gifts and talents, then match that up to, okay, well, what are the 3 most important skills or knowledge areas that I need to have in order to operate this business, and do those align with the things that not only am I talented and skilled in, but that I enjoy doing. If you don't enjoy doing a certain skill like accounting, maybe that's not something that you want to have to focus on, and really need to figure out how you're going to address that need.
You mentioned something a little earlier that's a really good, important thing to keep in mind. In the market area that you're operating in, you may not get a lot of cooperation, but it's as simple as picking up the phone and calling a different part of the country. And it's amazing. I've encouraged a lot of clients to do that. To say, find somebody else who's doing what you want to do in another area and call them. You'd be surprised, you'd be amazed at how helpful they can be. They're willing. It's like, somebody wants to know what I think. Yeah, let me tell you what I've been through. What's been the ups and the downs of your business, because I'm getting ready to go into that business, and what are some of the things that the skills and the knowledge and the areas that's, you mentioned that earlier, and it's really a good thing. I mean, there's people out there that are just waiting for somebody to call and say, yeah, let me tell you what it's really like, because nobody told me. I'm glad you're asking. So not that they're going to talk you out of doing it, but it just give you a little more insight.
And yeah, and there's a couple of good questions that, you know, you could think about asking someone when you're talking to them is, you know, what would you do over if you could, right? Bless you. Also, what are the most difficult challenges and tasks that you're dealing with? You know, how do you deal with them? What are they? You know, maybe you changed your approach to it and it worked better. So yeah, I can't stress enough, you know, doing some of that research, and glad to hear you've, you know, done a lot of that in your line of work. But it can really help you. And I think, you know, we were talking to this client the other day. Doug mentioned to me that the banker on their loan said that it was one of the best business plans that he had ever seen come through their office. And, you know, as we were talking, I think one of the big reasons why it was so good is because this particular entrepreneur, she had really researched this. She had spent a lot of time understanding the thing that she's getting into, you know, has gone to conferences across the country to understand more about this, and, you know, really spend time with it to think things through on the front end. And, you know, I think what that translates to is a lot less surprises down the road, right? You won't be smacked with like a sudden cost in 2 to 3 years that threatens to put you out of business if you've been able to head it off from the beginning. All right, so wrapping up my part here, we'll talk about the sales forecast. So we've got, by the way, we've got a business plan template, a cash flow projection template that we could share with you guys. At the end of this, we'll be inviting you to meet with, you know, a business advisor for one-on-one counseling if you should feel the need. And one of the big things that we help clients with is putting together the written part of their business plan, but a key component to ride alongside it is that cash flow projection. So it's an Excel template that breaks out your monthly cash flow month by month for the first 12 months, and then shows you what years 2 and 3 look like based on the assumptions that you're plugging in. So, you know, one of the first pieces on that cash flow projection is how much are you selling, right? So thinking through the different revenue streams that you have and the realities around it, you know, what am I going to charge for my product or service? And is a customer willing to pay that much, right? So that's where looking at your competition comes in, is to understand, you know, what are they charging? And if I'm going to charge a premium, can I justify that? And are people going to actually react to it and you know, buy? Really thinking through, though, you know, seasonal fluctuations, what are we truly going to sell, and trying to be very realistic about that. That's where the market research can come in again too, is, you know, we can show you like, okay, if you're projecting I'm going to sell $5 million worth of furniture out of this location in a given year, but we're showing you market research that says, well, most of those retail bricks and mortar locations in your area are doing 900,000, then you're going to need to really look at, you know, how you're arriving at that $5 million sales projection. So really thinking through, okay, if I'm going to sell, you know, be open 6 days a week, what am I going to sell on average a day? And extrapolate that out, you know, across the entire year. Account for seasonal fluctuations in that top line sales number. Other things you're going to want to think about too is, you know, if your product or service is unique, especially for something like, you know, yours that you may not see a lot of folks doing already, you're going to want to think about the time that it's going to take to educate your marketplace to the point where they will buy from you. That's going to take you some time, and you're going to need operating capital to hold you over to cover costs until then. So if you are incurring costs along the way, you're going to need to make sure that you're factoring that into your overall sales projection, while also considering, you know, if you do have competition, what are they going to do in response to your coming to the market? You know, they may suddenly decide, all right, we're going to undercut that price. And now that throws your whole projection into question because your competition has reacted differently than you thought they would. And ultimately, you know, just making sure that your sales estimates are reasonable and based on data. And that's where we come in a lot. You know, I think Doug has a great approach to helping think that through and using the market research data to back up what we're saying, and ultimately factoring into those projections. So, so those tools, those templates are things that we share with clients commonly. And like I said, if you come to us for that one-on-one counseling, we'll be happy to share those with you if they're a need at that particular point in time. So I think, Doug, you're up next to talk through startup expenses.
Okay, so, we kind of touched on a little bit earlier, who might need some assistance in getting prepared to approach a bank. And so, much like Tom alluded to with the discussion or the items about sales forecasting, it's right. One goes hand in hand with the other. If you're doing projections, you want to be able to project out what your sales are going to be. And how do you do that? You do it incrementally. You decide, what is it that I'm selling? Is it a service? Is it a product? If it's a service, how often can I offer that? How can I multiply that? With kids in a daycare, you can very easily see, well, I have this much space and the law allows me to have this many kids, and I have to have X number of adults supervising at different ages. And so it's pretty easy to incrementally determine at maximum, what can I do? So that's an easy one. Others might be food, which is a little harder because you're like, okay, I'm going to sell this and this and this and this. How many of this item will I sell each day? How many of this? How often? How many times can I turn a table? So the expense part of that, or the income part of that, is a little difficult, but I always challenge people and say, well, there had to be a number in your head when you decided I want to start a business. Somewhere in your head, there was something that triggered and said, I think I can make this much money doing it. Where did you get that number? And let's back up and see if that's accurate or not. And so that's the first step. And so, you kind of talked about that. So what's the next step? What are the related expenses to each day income? One of the neat things about the IBIS World Industry Reports, by NAICS code, every industry has a wealth of information. Those reports are 35, 40 pages long. And when I was in a bank, if someone walked through the door and said, I want to start a business, or I want to borrow money, and this is what my business, this is the industry that I'm within. Obviously, as a banker, I wouldn't have that knowledge of that industry. So I've got to do a quick study. And so getting one of those reports would be instrumental for me to find out, is this an industry that we want to lend to? Is it a business that's on the rise, or is it a business that's tanking? We don't want to make a loan to somebody if it's a business that's already reached its peak and now it's going the other direction. So how do I know that? Well, those industry reports will show what's the current performance, what's the outlook for that industry, and what are the key performance factors. But if you drill down, like I said, it's 35, 40 pages long. And let me back up and say, those reports for a bank this is 10, 12 years ago, would cost $800 to $1,000 each to get those. And the bank would then put that on your loan bill. So the customer would end up paying for that, but that's a lot of money. We are able to get those reports at no charge. Back to what I said, we offer our time and services at no charge because the state of Indiana has libraries of this information through IU and Purdue that we can tap into. They've already got it. They make it available to us. So it's really nice. And there's sometimes I've had clients, like we talked about earlier, what industry are you? And it may fall a little bit between 2 or 3. So I'll pull all 3 and send them to them, and they may be able to glean a lot of information from each one. But one of the things I really like about those reports is it will show a breakdown, and it's a color graph that shows what's the biggest cost factor, what's the next largest one. And it could be, in some industries, it could be payroll. With a childcare industry, I'm sure payroll is the biggest one. You make this much money because I've got this many kids, and how much do I put toward payroll? Well, you're going to have 38% of my revenue is attributed to payroll. That's a wealth of information to have, that breakdown of expenses, each one as a percent of revenue. So if you can feel confident about the revenue you've projected, you can go back and look at that, and it's not always exact for your particular business. It's an industry figure and it's a national average, but it's really helpful information to start with, because otherwise you're like, I have to sit here and calculate how many people and times how many hours per day they're working and what am I paying them. If you have that number, then you can do the math and say, okay, it says about 38%. I'm gonna guess that's what it is in daycare of your annual revenue. So if you figure that and you say, okay, the state's saying I've got to have this many people because I've got to have more at the 3-year-old level than I do at the 10-year-old level. I've got to have more people. You do the math and figure out how many people am I going to have? Can I do that with this much if I'm projecting this revenue? Does that make sense? Know what I'm saying? It's a math equation. We can help you walk through that, but that's one very important way because it'll give a breakdown. What's my payroll expense? You know, in a restaurant business, it might be inventory, which is your raw material, your eggs, your bacon, your flour, your chicken, your whatever. All the inventory that I have to have is X% of my revenue, and so. And that's a very thin margin. You know, the thing that I would drill down to if I pull that report is what's the profit margin? Did I pick an industry that's about that thin? You know, groceries is a good example because I grew up in the era where you had neighborhood grocery stores on the corner. Families owned them and they had a butcher shop and they had everything you wanted. They've been replaced by convenience stores and the prices have gone crazy high. And so who's getting the bulk of the business? First it was Great Scott, Beeler's, Bilo, the bigger, and now they've gone to Costco and Sam's. It's like volume makes up for the small margins, and they're the only ones that can sell in such volume that they're going to make a profit because, and so consequently, it makes it harder for the small operator to operate and to make a profit. And that's important to know as you venture into a new business that you want to do to see truly who are my competitors. And are there more coming on the horizon that I don't know about that are going to push me aside? You know, even to the point what you talked about earlier, do I do brick and mortar or do I online? Because so many people still have the mindset that I open up a shop, literally a literal shop, and my competition doesn't have a shop. I don't see them. They're online and they're stealing all the business. And I made a big mistake by agreeing to pay rent or to buy and have a mortgage of a piece of property when I don't need it. I could have sold it online. So those are important things. So when you're thinking about your expenses, you're thinking about payroll, inventory, equipment, insurance, utilities, a whole host of things, and we'll help you think those through. But those industry reports really help to point that out. And so when you're trying to determine what all am I forgetting? You know, this is a good, page 30 has a good listing of different types of expense items that might come up, may not be ones that you particularly have. Yeah.
I had a question for you, and you may answer this in a second. I don't want to get you guys off subject. But so like with what I'm wanting to do and the rise of fuel costs, I mean, obviously I'm gonna have to go to and from the site that I'll be working on. How do you factor in the rates for, you know, distance drove? So maybe you don't have to drive an hour and a half away to do a job versus 30 minutes away. How do you determine price?
Most likely, most models would be mileage. How many miles do you drive? And then with gas fuel costs going up, you've got to constantly adjust that. Not everybody does. I know Uber and Lyft have changed their fees because, you know, they had a model of picking people up, taking them wherever, and they had it pretty much set in place. When now fuel's doubled in price, they had to go back and say, we can't do it anymore. We got to do it differently. And so I would say anybody, FedEx, UPS, anybody that involves vehicles driving great deals miles have to look at that and adjust it. And hopefully we don't live in an economy where they adjust it from 51 cents a mile to 89 cents a mile and then never go back. If hopefully gas prices go back down, they'll bring that back down again. But that's the way that I think most businesses monitor that and keep track of that. And you have to kind of stay on top to say, you know, truly, what is it for my business? What am I experiencing? How many miles do I drive? And what, on those miles, how much is it costing me? And you want to at least get that much back, if not a little bit more. Does that make sense? And I won't go into a lot of detail. There are some worksheets here. I'm not a big fan of those. We have a cash flow projection Excel spreadsheet that I really love, and Don mentioned the client that we talked to a couple of days ago utilized the format that we have, and the bank loved it because it's a 3-year outlook. And so the first year they want to see that you've taken the time and effort to do month by month by month. And the second year can be a total income and expense, and third year a total. So you've gone 3 years. But what that does essentially is forces you to determine how much income can I make? Have I taken into account all the expenses that I'm going to be experiencing? And I pay myself something. The bank is looking primarily to see, is there anything left after all of that for them to pay this loan payment? That's all they're looking for. If they're not generating enough income, if you're just breaking even with all your expenses, they can very clearly see, well, you're not making enough money. Now, is it simple to go back to, well, I'll just up my income? That doesn't always work, because as your income rises, especially if you're in a inventory dependent business, but your inventory costs, your cost of goods is going to go up as well. So you're not really doing it. You've got to look at, am I looking good? Am I really making good estimates of my expenses? And again, utilities have gone up a lot recently. There's a lot of things that have been factored in, the supply chain issues and availability, supply and demand. A lot of things have gone up. And so people have to continually look at those expenses and say, and we've seen it probably most readily in restaurant food. When you go out to eat, what maybe cost you, if it's a husband or wife going out to eat, $30 to go eat somewhere, it's now $45, $50. And it's just very evident, and it costs them more to get there. So, you know, it's just, in a good savvy business is looking at that all the time to make sure you don't just knee jerk say, well, next week we're going to raise our prices. You've got to really look at that and say, what are my competitors doing? So expenses are a really critical part of it. And again, I won't go into a lot of detail. This is something we really work with our clients with more one-on-one, but I wanted you to see the process that goes into it mentally to make sure I'm factoring all the expenses in, and how important those industry reports can be to help guide you in that and give you some background information. So let me go make sure that I'm on target here. So let's move to part 3, and I think we gotta catch up and we'll get past it. Okay. So feasibility, the market, the management, and the money score sheet. Again, these are exercises I think are really, really critical. And I'm looking at page 44 right now. And I think, yeah, those questions take some time. Don't do it here. I'm not gonna make you do it here. I think it's really a good exercise to do on your own in your own time. Both that one, the management score sheet, and the money score sheet. It's not like you're going to come up with a score. There is a formula at the end to see if you're within where you should be. But I think it's more important to just convince yourself that I like, look at page 44. I have demonstrated that my product service is needed in the proposed market area. Do you strongly agree? The proposed product or service is different, better than anything already available from the competitors. You know, most everybody does that. Most everybody looks at the market and says, yeah, I'm gonna have something better. It's going to be better priced. It's going to be more readily available. Does that mean you're going to be successful? What do you think's missing there? What element or elements that
Hard work.
Pardon?
Hard work.
Yeah, that's one of those. But I think most everybody that embarks on their own business says to themselves, at least at the outset, I'm gonna work hard. I'm gonna work harder than the competitor is. I'm gonna make sure that I'm delivering a good product. And then price isn't always the winner. You know, availability might be part of it, but based on research and conversations, I've identified why customers will buy my product or service. A lot of people don't spend a lot of time on the why. Why would they come here? Is it convenient? Is it the price? You know, in the sense of a restaurant, is it the ambiance that how many of you are familiar with a place called House of Como in Evansville? You been there?
Yes.
How many of you passed it up and said, why don't they clean that up? Or why don't they tear that down?
They didn't want to invest that much money in the space. I mean, when they're making money hand over foot. as far
They
as-
are extremely,
Looks like
busy.
a
Their
dump
place
from the
was
outside.
packed last night. My wife and I went there last night because we had a couple that we go out with occasionally, and that's where they wanted to go. And so once or twice a year, we'll go there. The food's great. It's not outstanding. I can't really tell you why people go there. I think the salads are always good. Arabian salad, Arabian is their thing. But I got spaghetti, and it's always good spaghetti. So I got, but steaks are probably the best that you'll find anywhere. I mean, I'd bar none in this part of the country. The steaks are the best. You'll pay for it. You'll get a steak that thick. They put some kind of rub on it that's unbelievable. And it's as big as your plate, and it's probably 50, 60 bucks. That's what it was a year ago. I don't know. It says market price, and I didn't order one last night. Anything that says market price, I'll shy away from, but
What'd you have, chicken?
I had spaghetti. That's my thing. I love spaghetti. I love Italian. So, but anyway, ambiance isn't always a thing. I mean, I've literally sat there with my wife and this other couple, and Santa Claus was looking over our shoulder the whole night. You know, it's like, what? It's decorated in Christmas all year long, if you haven't been there.
It's in Evansville?
It's in
Yeah, it's on
Evansville.
Kentucky Avenue.
It's in a not so great part of town. It used to be a great hustle bustle place. And it's all mostly manufacturing warehouse
People
now.
that went to the track used to go there all the
Oh,
time.
it was a place where you would see people. The mayor was there a lot. The customers would, I mean, businesses would take their
They had a
customers
good
out for a
bar.
drink or dinner. And it was close to Ellis Park where they would go either before or after the races, and it's just a unique place. If you're ever down, you need to get a reservation because you can't just walk in.
You get a call.
It's busy. And they open at 5 and they close at like 9 at night. That's it. They don't do lunch, they don't do breakfast.
And you go out there at a certain time when it's like packed, like the
And-
parking lot's packed. It's.
Most importantly, it's cash only. So you don't walk in with a
Cash
card.
on, yeah.
Yeah.
They used to accept checks.
Yeah, I think they might.
They
They might still do check.
might.
But don't show a card or they'll kind of laugh at you like, no, I'm gonna stand there till you get cash. But my point there is that so many things that go into deciding your business model and what it is gonna look like and how am I going to compete? A lot of people overlook. One thing that I really harp on with folks is, especially with food, but really with a lot of things, is the habits that human beings have. I would say if people are like me, and I think most of them are, if you're thinking I'm going to go out to eat, would you say you've got 4 or 5 places that are top of your list?
Yeah.
If you're talking to your best friend or your wife or husband and somebody you're going to go eat with, those 4 or 5 are what pop into your head. Let's go here. I went there last week. Okay, let's go here. And you go down to 2. You never get past 5 hardly. Now, occasionally you do, but you don't think outside. So if somebody opens up new, you go invariably to try it out because it's new. And you may walk out and say, that was pretty neat. Yeah, I have to remember that. But how often do you? You go and you talk to somebody and say, have you been there? Yeah, I went there, we opened. I need to go back there. And you don't, because you're so entrenched in what you do. And that's what, when you talk about disruptive business, it's really a thing. I mean, the biggest one that's happened in my lifetime is online sales compared to walking into a mall or to a physical location. That's huge. So it's disrupted people. It took a long time for me because I said, I'm never buying clothes online because I want to touch them, feel them, try them on and see what it looks like. And then when somebody said, we can make this so easy, you can go ahead and do that, buy them, buy 10 of them. all different colors, and whatever you don't want, send it back, there's no charge. What? You know, so if you're thinking of opening a business where you want that one-on-one touch with people and you want them to come in, it may not work if your competitor is selling it online, and more and more and more of that is happening. So it's important to know what it takes, whether it's food, and back to the thing about restaurant, if you went in, you know, the thing that I really encourage people is the experience memorable? Was it to the point where, wow, not only was it food good, but the server was great, the price was pretty great, I liked the ambiance, and it was memorable to the point where now it's on my list. When I say where I want to go, it's like number 2 or 3. That must be pretty good. That's what it takes. And people oftentimes go into a business with an idea that I want to do that and I'm going to be the best. And the best example is you got a pie. I use that example a lot with people. The pie is only so big, and right now it's being consumed by whoever's out there in the market. And I say I'm going to start a business and I want a piece of that pie. How am I going to get that? What am I going to do? And it isn't as simple as saying I'm going to be the best price. It isn't as simple as saying I'm going to give the best service. It's a combination of all of that. And then there's this unknown factor that somehow gets people to say, I'm going to switch what I've been doing and do this. A lot of times it's personal appeal, in smaller communities too. I know that person and I've known them for years and I trust them. So I'm going to quit doing what I've done, even though that person's a friend of mine too. They'll understand, I think, and I'll go to this person. I mean, it's a lot of that. And so you've got to really think through. The point that I'm making about all of those examples are that it's just so complicated and you really have to research and understand. And then at the end of the day, take calculated risk in whatever business model you choose to say, I think I can get a piece of that pie. And because it's being consumed right now by whoever's out there, unless it's entirely new business that the market doesn't see yet. And then it's, you know, then it's wide open. So take a time and do the market score sheet and really look at your answers and say, I strongly agree, I agree, I'm neutral, disagree, or I strongly disagree with those. The same with management. I have a strong need, and I'm on page 45 now, need to achieve, and I'm persistent. I'm comfortable and confident taking risks. We kind of talked about that earlier. You need to be a risk taker, but you don't want to be reckless. You need to be calculated, smart risk taking. I know the most common skills needed to operate this business, and I possess them, or I will get training. Those are the things we talked about earlier too. The money score sheet. I know what my pricing, costs, and gross margins will be for my business. That's huge. That's important. You've done your homework to know that. The estimated sales are built on researched assumptions about how much product service can be sold, projected selling price. My business's projected sales and expenses are comparable to the industry information I've obtained for similar businesses. Again, go down through there and go through it and score yourself on those. And then at the end, you can do the math and you can figure if you want. Supposedly if you come up with a total, if you're below 50, it means step back and maybe you don't need to be going into this business. If you're in the yellow light, proceed with, I'm not sure I agree with that, but I just think the whole process of going through and answering this question is helpful. It pushes you to do that. So any questions on any of that? Did anything pop up there that's surprising, or is it pretty much stuff you thought through? Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about loans. And I don't want to spend again a lot of time. Okay, if anybody needs to leave, we're kind of running a little behind, but
Can I get a real quick picture, because I really do have to get that?
Yeah.
Can I get a picture of you guys by the sign and then
Sure.
I have to go?
Yeah.
Sorry.
oh, that's fine.
You want us to stand up next to it?
Yeah. It looks better than the
And
next.
You gonna use this against me?
Stand on your hands.
I don't know, you want me
Can
to?
you just move over so that way we can see the sign too?
Sure.
There you go. Perfect. That's all I need. Thank you.
But yeah, let me, again, say that when we meet one-on-one is when we really get more into detail about financing and loans and things like that. But I want you to know the high view of that. And so I'll just go through this real quick. Anybody know their credit score? If you had an opportunity to find that out somewhere along the way, if you bought a house or if you bought a car, you probably get. And now they're sending out Experian and TransUnion and Equifax, the three major reporting agencies are sending. I got an email the other day. It said, did you know your score changed? And I had just bought a car and financed it because they give me $500 off if you finance it. And then I paid it off. And so it went down when I got the loan, and it went back up when I got, and they told me what it was. I've never seen it, never mailed it to me before. So what's good credit rating? 60, 75, 700. Some people are as high as 820. That's really phenomenal. One thing that I would encourage you, and I've just found this out recently, it's kind of a unique thing with millennials maybe, is that maybe they've been coached to not take on debt, which is really good. But to the point, there's one guy in particular I know, he's like 32 years old, and he's going on a golf trip with some other guys. And he said, well, you're going to get the car. Use your credit card. I don't have a credit card. What do you mean you don't have a credit card? How do you get to be 32 years old and you don't have a credit card? Well, I'm against debt. Well, come to find out, he has no credit established, none whatsoever. There's going to be a point when everybody needs to take out credit. So I say that as a cautionary thing that even if you just get a $500 credit card, go out and buy some groceries and then turn around and pay it off. Use it occasionally, go out to eat with it and then pay it off. You're establishing good credit in doing that. You're not assuming debt. So it's important in what you're trying to do is establish a credit rating, because there will be a time, my son and his wife are looking at buying a home and they both make enough income for a home. She never took on a student loan, never did, and she's 27 years old and doesn't have credit. So that's just helping you to understand how important that is. The next part of that, you have a good seat.
Thank you.
The 5 C's of banking, they're just important to know, in addition to your credit. And that's the one that you'll see on the very last, character. That's your credit score. The others are collateral, and that's most often the part that people that are starting a business saying, well, you're going to have all the collateral you need. You've got the building, you've got my inventory, you've got all this. And the guy that went out to eat with last night is a CFO for a company. He was called in to help with a company that was going down the tubes. He gets that a lot. He gets called in, help me out. And long story short, they file bankruptcy. And so the creditors are the banks. He said, we went through this Chapter 11 process, and the collateral was enough to cover the legal expenses. The bank gets nothing. The legal expenses were like $1 million. And so oftentimes people that are borrowing money says, well, you got enough collateral. Well, there's never enough collateral. And collateral is a really not an important thing, but it is one of the things the banks will look for. Cash flow is the important one. And I mentioned that earlier, the ability to cover your expenses and have money left over to cover the unexpected expenses. Cash flow will say there's money left over after everything to pay a loan payment. So that's why that's important. Capital is the actual money that you have. And the conditions is one that's very, very important, because if you're kind of mundane, but if you're trying to sell snow shovels in Hawaii, that's not going to work. The conditions mean what I'm trying to sell, whatever the service or product, is the market right for that? And so most often, you've said it yourself, kids need a place, and you're putting people on a waiting list probably because, and that's the same in Evansville. Parents want to be able to take their kids somewhere where they can trust them, and there's not enough service for the amount of demand there is. So conditions for that is off the chart. And then character, I said, is your credit score. So the other things, again, we can talk one-on-one. There are different ways to set your business up. Probably the most recommended, the most that we see is either a limited liability or an S corporation. Within either one of those, you can be a sole proprietor or you can be a partnership. It's important if you are partnering with someone that you have an operating agreement. It's almost mandatory that you have an operating agreement because it's, to me, I call it a prenup for businesses. You want to be able to understand what each party brings to the table. It's very clear and it's put in writing so that if somebody wants out, it isn't always bad terms. It may be that you get to a point and say, I love this, but I need to move on, do something else. You want out of the business, what am I going to get? Better. So we can talk about that later, but it's just good to know. And then other considerations are registering. Indiana is one of the easiest states in the country to set up a business entity, a legal entity. Secretary of State's website is phenomenal to go on, start the process. You can do it in the morning, and by the afternoon, you can get an email back with your LLC or your S Corp certification. So it's kind of neat. It does a search of business names to make sure that the name you've chosen for your business isn't already in use by somebody else. It'll send you to the Department of Revenue to establish a tax ID number, all that one stop. And, you know, invariably we'll see people that come to us and I say, have you registered your entity? Oh yeah, I paid LegalZoom $800. And then like, what? And yeah, we have to pay them another $200 every year. So don't do that. You don't have to. You can do it yourself and we can work with you.
$70.
Pardon?
I did my LLC and I did 2 LLCs and 2 tax ID numbers and it cost me like $75.
Yeah, it's pretty
It was
inexpensive.
very easy. It took us less than an hour to do 2.
Yeah, that's good because in some states,
That's all
I
in
think
the
it's,
Secretary of State's thing.
Yeah, that right there, the
I didn't know
inbiz.in, yeah.
yeah, inbiz.gov.
Mhm.
Yeah, it is really great. Regulations, obviously, it's important to know if you're going to locate a certain place that you look ahead of time, make sure that you can in fact do that kind of business there. And then what are all the regulations around it? Is it somewhere I'm going to have to get it zoned commercial instead of residential? And we can talk with you about that. Health department
Pike
issues.
County doesn't do that, but they'll write you a letter. I had to submit a letter for my loan agency saying they don't zone commercial, like in Winslow. There was no zoning at all, but I had to have proof of that,
Okay,
so.
but operating out of your home,
Yeah, she had to write me that letter.
yeah, if you're going to operate out of your home, it would be a totally different thing. There'd be more state regulations, I guess.
So even if I were like to operate out of in town in Pike County, I mean, in Petersburg, so I'm right off of.
So the city of Petersburg and interchange is zoned, and then Winslow and the incorporated limits is zoned. So.
Okay. So just some reminders, things that depending on your business, what might pop up, you want to be sure and look at those and make sure you cover your bases. We'll be, I guess, sending out for you to fill out a form.
There is a form in your packet, if a feedback form, it should be the back page on the left side. So if you would fill that out, please,
Yeah,
for us.
please fill that out.
And then I did send out a link to before the class this morning. I sent out a link where you can register with us, and we ask that you do that even if you're not planning to meet with a business advisor, because we have to report to the SBA what we do with our trainings, and each person has to have registered if we're going to count them towards that number. But if you do register and want to meet with a counselor, just reply to my email letting me know that, hey, I'd love to meet with someone, and we'll get you in touch and set up a meeting. I always like to emphasize too that, we're here for you as much as you need us. So, we tend to develop long-term relationships with clients. Doug has clients he probably has met with for several years, and, kind of come to him as they need to. So, we might have that initial meeting and you might be off and running and never need to meet with us again, but other times you may need our help at certain points in the future. So we encourage you guys to use our services as much as you need to. We are available to meet online, over the phone, in person as we're able to. So, feel free to communicate to us how you'd like to do that. And, if you really would want to meet in person, we are happy to make a trip. We might already be in the area. We could also use that as an opportunity to schedule meetings with other clients as well. So we appreciate you guys attending today, and sorry we ran over a little bit here, but feel free to contact us in the future if you're not going to meet with us right away, and we'll be happy to help you out.
Any questions anybody has? I know we kind of touched on a lot of things, but hopefully we answered questions you might have had and maybe